This video introduces the first of the geographic assignments, the North America Geographic assignment. And before we get into the assignment itself and the content that frames it, I want to talk just a little bit about what the geographic assignments are for. This is the place where I have the opportunity to introduce to you the basic principles of social science and the geographic tools that will be used in this course and that geographers use as a whole. If we take a look at the course outcomes, you'll see that two of them are focused on being able to describe the discipline of geography and its data and its tools and how it works, and also describe and use basic social science methods as well. This is the part of the course where we'll be doing that content. Let's first off talk a little bit, though, about what geography is, because where we start in the course is probably closest to what most people think of as geography. And then as the course develops, you'll see that it departs a little bit from how the public perceives the discipline to how professionals view the discipline. Most people, when they think of geography, they think it's about memorizing places, names of cities, rivers, identifying countries, and things like that. There is an element to that because people need to know where basic things are, like countries and rivers and cities and things like that. But geography is a lot bigger than that, as you'll see. In addition to talking about the basics of geography, we'll be talking about everything from population to climate to economics to try to understand essentially how the world works and how we can describe it and understand it, which is what the field of geography sort of is. It's a very interdisciplinary type of discipline. We engage in both physical geography, which is handled in another course, though elements of it will come into this more human geography course, where we use basic themes in geography, which I'll introduce in just a little bit, to try to understand the world. At the same time, we use specific types of tools like maps and geographic data. We apply all these themes and tools to try to understand how the world works. The themes of geography are themes that will come up again and again in this course, though I'm not going to point them out every time. You'll just sort of figure it out. The themes include: where are places? What is their location? But sometimes more important than just where is a place, what makes a place the way that it is? What things go behind the development of that place? Or what types of things enrich how we experience that place? And we'll do a little bit of that in the very first assignment that we're going to do in North America. Geographers also use and think about the idea of region. A region is bigger than a place. It's bigger than a location. It takes up a geographic area that's sometimes very similar or has attributes in it that contribute to the formation of places and the locations that are in them. Eventually, we'll move away from some of this more traditional geography. We'll never lose it, but we'll start talking a little bit more about what geographers like to call spatial patterns. How can we see in data, for example, differences between one part of the world or another part of the world? We'll jump into that most prominently when we talk about population around the world, which is a particular interest of mine. We'll also be looking at the relationship between humans and the environment, and you'll do that in this first assignment as well. How did the environment help to frame the way that humans made their locations and made their places and things like that? As we look at all of these themes, we'll come back again and again to maps, interpretation of maps, trying to understand what we can see. We'll also look at what geographers call geospatial data. Geospatial data are the data that are collected around the world that have some innate geographic information. Could be data that's taken from a county or from a country in this course, or from any number of locations or places. And we'll always be thinking about a scientific approach to geography and the world. Science is defined by empiricism. Empiricism is a systematic observation to try to understand the world around us, build theories about it, and solve problems. And I will explicitly talk about this notion of empiricism, but a lot of it will be implied in the way that we look at the world. And I think that that's the case for this first assignment. You'll be empirically looking at the world by trying to interpret maps that you see of the world through Google Earth in this case. All these themes and all these tools are going to come together in a lot of interesting ways in this course. In the case of the North America geographic assignment, what I want you to do is really get used to the idea of looking at Google Earth, trying to interpret what's going on there, and to use Google Earth as a map to try to understand how geography impacts human society. You should also be reading Marshall's Prisoners of Geography. And for the first module, I want you to read the introduction to the book and the chapter on North America and the United States. And you'll see that the way that Marshall thinks about the world is to argue that a country's geography or a part of the world's geography is very important in helping us to understand how that country came to be where it is on the global stage. He's looking at things in a very big global way. What I'll be asking you to do in this assignment is to consider a very local place and ask the same sort of thing. How does the geography that you can see and interpret in Google Earth or from some other basic sources that you might use help us to understand that particular place? So in particular, what I want you to do is I want you to choose a large town or city in North America. Don't choose some really small place. It doesn't work very well. And then try to interpret empirically through the maps of Google Earth and any other basic data that you can find how the location of that place and its relationship to the environment really impacted its development and how it became what it became. In doing that, you'll have to ask yourself the question, what made that large town or city become the success that it was either in the past or is today? Why is it where it is, and what might its future be? In order to develop this empirical argument, you'll be using information that you can glean from Google Earth, but also from the story map information, and also from the Google Earth exploration information that you have as well. You might also want to do your own basic informal research, some web, basic web searches to try to get some information about a particular large town or city. Generally, this will be information that's in the public domain that pretty much everyone knows, so you don't have to provide specific citations if it's just commonly known information. I want you then to take that information and try to figure out why the city or town is where it is. And when you complete the assignment, you are going to be giving me a couple of deliverables. One will be a short essay in which you discuss how that large town or city in North America has been shaped by geography and its development. And then another part of that essay will be a reflection on using geographic information in order to understand places and their relationship to the environment. How does looking at a map and looking at things help you to understand the world? You'll also have to give me 2 screenshots from Google Earth, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. One will be a local shot of the place that you're looking at, and one will be a little bit more regional, sort of panned out a little bit. You have to be able to demonstrate the use of panning the screen in Google Earth when you do this. Whenever you do one of the assignments, make sure that you examine the assignment rubric that's attached to it, so you make sure that you hit all the key things that you have to. So let's take a quick look at Google Earth now and a particular example. I'd like to say, before I start into this, that I've given you some examples already in the Google Earth exploration, And in the North America region theme, there are a bunch of examples, including one very specific one about Atlanta. But for this assignment, instead, I am going to talk about another part of the world. Well, another part of the world from the American South, Atlanta. I'm going to choose a place that's pretty close to where I grew up. It's a small city or large town, you could call it, called Altoona, Pennsylvania. And it's right in the middle of central Pennsylvania. If I zip out here a little bit, you'll see Pennsylvania framed here. We have Ohio over here, New York to the north, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia down here. And if we go down towards Altoona, what we're going to see is a couple of things. That mountains are really important in this area. Not great, big, huge mountains like you might be used to in the American West, but still complicated mountains that make it difficult to move around in this area. On the western portion of this map, we have one of those dissected plateaus that I talk a little bit about in the story map. And then over on the eastern side, we have the folded mountains that I referred to as well. And Altoona lies right on the edge between these two features. And there are actually a couple little gaps and passes that are pretty prominent in this area that allow one to move from this folded area up to this other area as you move across Pennsylvania and the American West. And this was really important in the past. Altoona is not particularly important anymore. But in the past, when you were moving from places like Philadelphia and the East Coast out to the American West, which was the West at the time, places like Pittsburgh and Ohio, you had to get through this maze of mountains, and you had to get up and over and into these other mountains. And that was done largely by railroad. And as trains moved their way up and over these mountains, Altoona became a natural place where the rail was constructed and built, and it was also a break in bulk area, as I also talked about in the story map as well, that allowed the rail to get up and over this sort of escarpment that is formed by these different mountains over here. This is the ridge and valley of central Pennsylvania, and these are the Allegheny Mountains. They're all part of the Appalachian Mountain system. So I pretty much described why Altoona is where it is. Now, Altoona might have been other places as well. Port Matilda, for example, might have been a larger size city. It wasn't. There are a couple of other places farther to the south that might have ended up being big, important cities as well. Altoona was very important in the 19th century by American standards. Today it's relatively small, but back in rail days it was quite important. It just happened that it ended up here in Altoona, where you had this confluence of different types of mountains, some useful passes, and the need to break bulk as you moved your way up into this area. So if I were to use Altoona as the example for this particular assignment, I would zoom into Altoona and maybe leave the lettering here. But remember, if you want to, you can go change things, and you can change the base map, and you can make it a little bit cleaner if you want to, if you just want to show the basic geography. But then I want you to pan the map. And by panning the map, I mean you have to depress your mouse key and you have to move it so we can see the mountains and their three-dimensionality a little bit. And I'm going to zoom in on the local place of Altoona so we can really see the distinction between, on the one side, these ridge and valley mountains, and on the other side, this much more complicated dissected plateau and the escarpment that's between it. None of the mountains are really huge, so it's not super important that we show them a great deal three-dimensionally. But this would be a pretty good view showing the local nature of Altoona. And then I want you to capture the screenshot. And there are a bunch of ways to do this on the desktop. It's going to be easier to get a good shot on the desktop than on your phone or an app. Usually it involves pressing something like the function button and print screen. Your keyboards will vary depending on if you're using a Mac or a PC and what iteration of it is. But you should be able to figure out pretty easily how you print this, that will then be captured as a screenshot, and you can save it as a JPEG, JPG file, or a bitmap file, BMP file, or a PNG file. There are all sorts of different ways to, and there's no one particular way. But I'm going to want to see that image. I also want you to show a bigger regional picture. And the regional picture could just be panning and allowing us to sort of see how Altoona sits right in between all this ridge and valley here and the escarpment over here. Or we might go out a little bit bigger as well, in order to see its relationship between the East Coast and the American West. We might have to add in a little arrow or something in here so that we can see where Altoona is. But I will leave it to you to determine what is the best regional screenshot to include. You have to have at least 2 screenshots. You might want to put a little bit of extra stuff on the map, draw some lines and things like that. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can use Google Earth to do that in later assignments. But that is the assignment, and if you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know. I am happy to help you.